all see me and hear me. All right. My name is Reina Pomeroy. I'm the head of community at Modern Fertility. I'm super excited to be flipping the script and this month and really taking the role of host today. It brings me back to my podcast days. I'm going to be interviewing Natalie Franke. You know her, you love her. She's the head of community at HoneyBook and co-founder of the Rising Tide Society. Give it up for Natalie. But to start off, I want to welcome you to this Global Virtual Tuesdays Together. For those of you who are brand new, Rising Tide is a community of small business owners, independent freelancers, service providers, and give it up for the creative entrepreneurs who unite in spirit of community over competition. And there's hundreds of local chapters led by amazing volunteer leaders, co-leaders, and chairs here. And there's a large Facebook group with over 70,000 community members, facilitated by an incredible team of online moderators. There are educational resources released almost daily, which is incredible, blog posts, webinars, templates, monthly downloadable guides, and so much more, right? Completely free for the community. So if you're new, welcome. Drop in the chat and say hi. Rising Tide believes an empowered creative economy will change the world. And by elevating the voices of small business owners, sharing your stories and building a thriving community, we can support you in your pursuit of a sustainable livelihood. Last year was a crazy year, right? And coronavirus shut down the Rising Tide's in-person meetings, and they decided to take those monthly meetings into meetups online. And there's been an incredibly overwhelming positive response, which is why we're here today. And we're continuing to do it online to make it accessible education every single month. So today, we are talking about an awesome topic, super fun topic about relationship building and networking, which is one of my favorite topics and with one of my favorite people. And when this topic was selected, I knew that we had to turn the spotlight on our very own community expert. So I'm going to introduce to you Natalie Franke, but she really doesn't need an introduction. Please give it up for Natalie Franke. Natalie's one of the founders of the Rising Tide Society. And she is here to help many, many people support each other in hundreds of thousands of cities across the world. She's taken this hashtag and turned it into a movement that now spans the globe. I mean, who hasn't used community over competition on their Instagram, right? Today, Natalie is dedicated to cultivating community and raising the tide for all. She inspires audiences to think differently about our culture comparison and adopt a mindset of abundance and camaraderie. Natalie serves as the head of community at HoneyBook and is releasing her very first book, Built to Belong, next week, which if you have not read and have not yet bought, you must do it. Natalie, you'll have to share here. Yeah. Anyway, just to speak of Natalie's book, we're giving away 5 copies of Built to Belong to live attendees today. So in order to be entered, you'll just have to share a takeaway or a mic drop moment from today's conversation or behind the scenes of how you're tuning into IG stories. And we love you multitaskers. We know you're doing it. Make sure to tag Rising Tide Society and Natalie Franke to enter. And we'll announce the winners live here when we wrap up today. All right. So Natalie, welcome to the hot seat. We are so happy to have you. Welcome to this Global Rising Tide Tuesdays Together meetup.
I'm so nervous. I posted we have like a leaders group before this, the SpongeBob like biting all his nails off gif, because I'm so nervous. I want to add one fun thing to the giveaway as a side note, because we didn't add this in the prep. But so when we do our 5-book giveaway, if you already bought a copy and you want to send it to a friend, we can send it to whoever you want. So if you've already pre-ordered, also, I will send you a book plate so it's signed. So whoever wins today will get a signed copy. It'll arrive in the mail with a personal note from me as a thank you just for your support of this community and how you're fighting for community over competition. So share on Instagram stories, tag Rising Tide, tag me, and Kate's gonna choose 5 winners at the end of this. And I'm so excited. I can't wait for y'all to read this book. I'm so excited and so honored to be chatting with you. Reina, thank you for switching places with me today.
Always. I love it.
I'm so excited.
Well, this is it's going to be such a juicy conversation, and we want you all in the chat to be asking your conversations because we know that it can be a really touchy, thorny subject. But let's get started. I know I've heard a rumor, Nat, that you strongly dislike the word or term networking. Is this true? And tell us that story.
Yeah, I do. I have a strong dislike of the word networking. Before I give my answer, I'm curious if anyone else does as well. If you do, will you let us know in the chat?
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. Let us know. And if you feel comfortable saying why you don't like the term, also drop that in. And I'm wondering if we have a similar reason. So when I first started as an entrepreneur about 10 years ago, I remember being told, oh, networking. That's the path to, starting up in a new market, growing a new business, scaling and kind of evolving. But when I would go to events that were centered around the concept of networking, they were always about walking into a room and figuring out what other people could give you, what you could get out of other people. You'd walk around, you'd collect business cards. It would be a very transactional experience. And when I was younger, I thought that's just how it had to be. Like when I first started my business, I thought, well, I guess this is the way that business owners connect with one another. And it wasn't until frankly, we started thinking through Rising Tide and how we wanted Rising Tide to be different as a community, that we started to have conversations around, well, what if it didn't have to be this way? And what if instead of walking into a room with a desire for those connections to be transactional, we walked into a room and desired for them to be authentically relational? And I'll give you an example. Instead of walking through the doors of a networking event and saying, okay, what can I get out of the people in this room? How can I collect those cards? How can I make those, intentional connections that are going to help me get to the next level? You flip that mindset on its head and you walk into the room and say, what value can I bring to the table today? How can I show up and serve the people in this room? What can I do for them? Not what can I get for myself? And something really powerful happens when you get a group of people together that walk into a room with that mindset, that aren't stepping into the room again, seeking transactionality around what they're going to take, but show up saying, what can I give? How can I support? How can I serve? How can I listen? How can I learn? How can I grow? How can I be curious in the support of other people in this room? The minute you step into a room where everyone shares that mindset, anything is possible. Anything is possible. And so I don't love the term networking because I think it leans on these old ways of doing business where we're out for ourselves and only for ourselves, where I truly believe we can look at this through a more relational lens, where we step into a room and say, I'm not here for the quick win. I'm here for the long game. I want all of us to make it. I want to be able to learn to grow alongside this community. And that means showing up with a mindset of service and of giving. And I think that is the fuel for so many of our Tuesdays Together groups that differentiates them in the landscape of communities that exist in the small business space. I hear this all the time. It's like, and our leaders who are here today, I know can attest to this. It's a mental shift that you take on when you lead one of these groups, but it has transformational impact for the people that show up to those meetups or the people that connect through those communities. Because again, it's about everyone sharing that mindset and everyone walking into that room saying, what can I do to grow this community today? How can I help somebody else in this space? And it's such a subtle mindset shift in how you walk into that room, but it has such a transformational impact for you. And it has such an incredible impact for the other people in the community.
I love that so much. There's a lot of resonance happening, lots of snapping happening in the chat right now. Megan said networking feels like there's an ulterior motive, right? That's that other transactional side of things. One of the things that came up for me as I was listening to you talk is like, what if you're brand new? What if you don't have anything to offer, right? Like that's like the scarcity mindset. But I want to hear from you, like as a seasoned person, what value can a newbie potentially bring? And like, if you're new, please drop that in the comments. I have been there and I have felt that. So Nat, go ahead.
I love this question because my first answer is every single human being that walks into a space has something to offer that space. And the minute we stop thinking that way, we lose so much value in the rooms that we walk into. Every single person has something valuable to offer. When I first started as well, I remember I was a wedding photographer for 8 years. And I remember other photographers being so aggressive in shunning newcomers. I don't want to hear what they have to say. What do they know? They're just here to take my knowledge and information. And if you've been a part of Rising Tide for any period of time, you know that we hold the opposite idea. We believe that when you walk into a room, listen to other people, learn from other people. And so someone who's new, who's just starting up, often has a very different perspective from someone who's been doing this for 5 or 10 years. that diversity in perspective makes the entire room better. The minute two people have different views of how to accomplish a goal or different opinions on how to get there, it enhances the entire experience for everyone. And so I would say, first, you have something incredible to offer. Second, know that although you may not have maybe the time and length of experience as one of the contributing aspects of what you can offer, you have a ton of other things to bring to the table. Again, when you're new, you're hungry, you might be learning new technologies that people who've been doing this for 10 years haven't tried. I can't tell you how many young newcomers in the independent business space that have taught me TikTok, Reels, with algorithms changing, have reminded me that it's okay to look like a goofball when testing out these new features right? Like, so there's fresh air that comes into the room and we all need that. I would also just say that I think sometimes whenever you walk into a space, and if you walk into a space and you're feeling that intimidation, you're feeling as though, what can I contribute? Who am I to share my knowledge? I want to just remind you, and my friend LaShonda Brown, who has been a part of our team in launching this book, I actually said this at one point, and I'll be honest, like I was having a moment of kind of fear in doing something new. And she said, well, who, why not you? Right? Like, why not you? Why not you to share your knowledge and information? So just acknowledge that it doesn't matter whether you're walking in on day one of your business or you are showing up year 10, year 15. I guarantee you, everyone in that room is just a little bit anxious to be there too. Everybody in that virtual space is feeling just a little bit of hesitancy in sharing their voice, sharing their opinion. Unfortunately, that doesn't really go away, at least in my experience, having done this for over 10 years. So know that you're not alone. And hopefully that brings a sense of comfort. At least it does for me. I always remind myself, everyone's nervous to be here. So that's normal. That's natural. And sometimes that little understanding and that little ability to empathize gives you the 20 seconds of courage you need to speak up, to show up, and in the pursuit of doing that, make incredible relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's like beyond just being a business owner, we're people, right? Like we have other parts of our lives and like there's always ways that we can connect on those fronts as well. Okay, changing topics, but very, very important. We're going to talk about your book a little bit. So in your upcoming book, you talk about community being built one person at a time. What has that meant to you as a co-founder of Rising Tide?
Ooh, good question. Also, I want to shout out LaShonda's here. LaShonda Brown, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. I didn't know you were going to be here. So I hope you caught that shout out. I hope you heard it because you're amazing. So circling back to the question, one person at a time. Look, here's the deal. So often when we think about relationships, just in the same way that we think about marketing, we think about any aspect of our business, we get wrapped up in the vanity metrics. We get wrapped up in the long-term goals of what we want to accomplish or how we want our community to look, how we want our friend group to be, how many connections we want to have, how many followers we want to have. I could go on and on. We get focused on the future, on the end goal, or even on the vanity metrics that don't even connect, right? And that's when I talk about followers, those vanity metrics. We don't focus on the fact that every single community is built one person at a time, one point of connection, one conversation, one relationship at a time, and then another, and then another. In the same way that for anyone who, has attended virtual events like this, it's one event and then another, and then another, and you start to connect with the same people. You start to forge relationships, but it doesn't happen overnight. And I think sometimes we get lost to that fact because we get caught up in, seeing photos of large groups of people or feeling like maybe we're the only one that is struggling with loneliness, especially in these last 18 months. I find it, and actually, can we do this? Can we have a moment of vulnerability if everyone is feeling up for it in the chat right now? If you have felt or experienced loneliness at any point in the last year, will you just type me or yes, or I've been there in the chat because I want to prove a point right now. Here we go. Look at this. Yep. Okay. Me too. Me too. We are living through a moment in time. And I promise, Kate, I'd avoid the word unprecedented because we've heard it enough in the last 18 months, but we are living through an incredibly unprecedented and difficult time. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in feeling like everybody else has it all figured out. Everybody else has all their relationships. Everybody else is well networked. Everybody else isn't feeling like this. They aren't longing for connection in the chaos. They aren't feeling like they're unheard, unseen. Like everybody else is experiencing something different than I'm experiencing. And while each of our experiences are unique and each person endures different challenges and different struggles in the pursuit of being a part of community, I guarantee you, as you can see from this chat right here, you are not the only one who is feeling lonely. You are not the only one who is feeling this way. And so when we talk about the power of one, what we're essentially saying is human beings are not highlight reels. Communities don't just appear overnight. Movements don't happen like magic. They happen one person raising their hand and saying, I want something better. I want to make an impact. I want to make a friend. I want to change X about our world. I want to do this. And I'm going to find one other person who agrees with me, one other person who's going to help fight this fight with me. Even the biggest of movements, even the communities that we look at, and like I think all the time, I see so much good work being done in the world, especially in this moment of everything that's unfolding right in front of our eyes. I see so many good organizations and good communities and great people stepping up. And it can be easy to look at them and say, oh, but yet again, they have this, they have that, they've scaled, it's huge, it's massive, and forget the fact that every one of those communities still started one person at a time, one conversation at a time, one relationship at a time. And so never doubt the power of one, never doubt the fact that even taking that first step of reaching out to somebody right now after this webinar, shooting off a DM, connecting with somebody, you see a post on Instagram stories. How many times in the last 24 hours, y'all, did you see a post on Instagram stories that spoke to your heart, or somebody sharing their life and you're like, oh, just like me, I feel the same way, but you didn't say anything. But you passively scrolled right by, but you kept going on with your day. And that person on the other side, they have no idea. They have no idea that there's that point of connection, that potential opportunity for a relationship to form. So what I want to encourage you to do is one at a time. When somebody crosses your path and their words hit your heart, when somebody shows up at the grocery store and is rocking a cool mask and you're like, I love your mask, like say it, right? These points of connection where we so often hold back, we retreat, we're afraid to engage. It doesn't take, a miracle to build a connection. It takes one small moment of courage, one conversation, one connection. So I believe in this so fiercely because this is how Rising Tide was formed. We didn't just become a community of 70,000 people. This didn't just happen, right? It was one conversation at a dinner table that led to one coffee meetup in Annapolis, that led to one Instagram post that people started to say, hey, I want that too, and it was imperfect, but it grew. And we learned along the way and we've stumbled, but we've done our best to grow and to continue to nurture and foster relationships one conversation at a time, one learning at a time. And so I hope that can be encouragement. I hope, because sometimes too, I think we think it needs to be perfect, right, Reina? Like we see something and we're like, if I can't do it perfectly, whether it's building a community, creating a friendship, whatever it is, then why should I do it? And nobody's perfect. We're all just doing the best we can. And so going back to the roots and the humility of like one foot in front of the other, one step at a time, it can really ground you, but also open up the freedom to doing life with others in a way that I think perfectionism or the fears that other people have it figured out can hold you back from.
Absolutely. Who else is so inspired by this? Like it's just so beautiful, right? And like it's so clear why you wrote this book. I kind of want to back it up a little bit and not to get us too off track, but why did you name the book Built to Belong? I'm just really curious about the answer here.
Yes. So for those who know me really well and know that I'm a neuroscience nerd, I actually, the title Built to Belong goes back to the roots and the foundation of the fact that our brains are wired for connection. That we are actually, when I say we are built to belong, I'm not saying it in some fluffy, supposed to lift you up, yes, hoorah, like we're built to belong. No, I literally mean you are wired for this. Like you are created for this connection. The way that your neurons operate, the way your brain is built, like it is wired for belonging and connection. Human beings cannot exist without one another. There's a part of the book where I talk about the fact that our own existence is the most beautiful depiction of biological interdependence, right? Like it's the fact that we need two other people's DNA to even create the unique miracles that all of you are, that we rely on another human being for 9 months to even breathe our first breath on this side of the womb. Like we are built for belonging, because without belonging, we do not exist. We cannot exist. And so it first acknowledges, who we are and why we need one another, but it also leaves room for the fact that although we are built for belonging, this is a battle. Like this is not something where it comes easy. This is not something where we have it figured out. This is not something where, everyone feels like they belong, but we sure as hell are built for it. So the title both acknowledges the reality and leaves room, I hope, for all of us to acknowledge we have a role to play, we have a part to play. And the subtitle talks about the power of community over competition, which leans more into like my contribution to this conversation, like where I can step into this conversation about community and belonging and really hopefully make an impact and contribute, because it is such a broad conversation, and it deserves to be such a broad conversation. So yeah. I don't know. I hope that's helpful. And yeah.
It's beautiful. We got a question from Marilyn that says,
I love this question.
Have you felt like COVID has affected your self-confidence in making connections? And if you have any tips for best practices for networking in the digital virtual COVID world?
Yes. And I first want to, in responding to this question, the answer is yes. And I'd be curious if anyone else is willing to share, have you felt like this too? Like, have you felt like the past 18 months experiencing the pandemic, having our entire kind of worlds changed and then rechanged and then hope and then surges and all of this, like, has that affected your self-confidence in connecting with others? If you feel comfortable dropping that in the chat, let us know. I know it has for me. Actually, so much so that in a recent live with Mina B, who I love, and if you're not familiar with Mina, she is a licensed therapist. She is just an incredible thought leader in relationships. We did a live, and I asked her in the live, I said, I'm starting to get invited to more in-person things with friends who are vaccinated. And Mina, I feel really nervous. Like, I feel really uncomfortable. I sat in my car. I had like a small panic moment. I was like, I'm not just referencing the fact that I'll show y'all for who is very pregnant, and just trying to protect this little human inside of me and be really, really intentional, with the virus. But I mean, because I haven't done this in almost 2 years. I haven't walked into a room in almost 2 years. And I'm a community person and I'm feeling afraid. And, she kind of came back to me and said, remember that how you're feeling is valid. The boundaries you want to set to protect yourself are valid. And her answer was far more eloquent than anything I can give. So I want to first encourage y'all, go, if you haven't
watch the replay,
go watch the replay, or go just check out Mina's, all the info she shares, because she's so spot on. The answer is yes. I do think the last 18 months have kind of shaken a little bit of what was familiar to us, whether we want to call that our confidence, right? Confidence comes in comfort. So when we're comfortable with something, the way things are, and that shifts into the way things are now emerging, it's natural for us to start to feel uncomfortable. And maybe like that foundation of what we were familiar with has been shaken. But in that same respect, I want us to look at that through the lens of that now opens up opportunity for better, for change, for growth. So yes, while it might feel a little more uncomfortable, while it might feel like our confidence has been shaken in connecting, whether it's virtually or in small meetups in person or whatever it may be in the future. And today, again, I feel like it varies week to week at this point. I just want to remind you that is room for growth. That is room to redefine boundaries. That is room for you to kind of discern, like, this is how it used to be, but I don't want to go back to normal. Side note, who doesn't want to go back to the way things were? Can I just get honestly, like, can I get a raise of hands? Because I went on a little rant about this. I promised that, Kate, I wouldn't be too ranty here. I was like, I promise I won't, but then I'm breaking it a little bit. When everyone said like, oh, we're going back to normal, like the rush to return to normal, this was more May, June, prior to the rise in Delta. I just remember feeling like, ugh, like, I don't want to return to normal. Of course, there are parts of the past that I long for: crowded tables with meals shared, like group hugs that are too awkwardly long and uncomfortable, rising tide leader retreats that are truly the highlight of my life. Like, of course, there are things that I miss and I long for, and I can't wait for that to return. But there was so much about the past that I think that the past 18 months have allowed us to reflect on, and so many things in our relationships with others, how we connect with others, where, we've come through a difficult season. We're still in many ways going through a difficult season, and that refines us. It changes us. I hope it emboldens us. So while the foundations that we were used to have changed, and that leads to that feeling of uncomfortable, those uncomfortable feelings, and that maybe lack of confidence that you feel entering a virtual meetup or attending an in-person event in the future when you can and when it's safe again. I want to encourage you to think about it differently and say, the reason I feel uncomfortable is because I'm not the same person I was walking into this pandemic. I am different. I have been changed. And then acknowledge and give room and space and grace to know that other people are doing the exact same thing. When they show up to a digital event today, y'all are not the same people you were 18 months ago, 20 months ago, right? We're different. We're changed. And so although it can feel overwhelming or it can make us feel kind of shaken, just go into it with that attitude of like, no, this is good. This discomfort identifies that I'm different, that this is different, that gives room for hope, for opportunity, for growth. And I'm meeting people on the other side that maybe I think I knew or I did know in a past season, but all of us have emerged and changed throughout this experience. And so Mina helped me to come to that realization in her own way. She's awesome. But then also I've been growing into that a little bit, thinking about how this also ties into the way that our world is changing with the Great Resignation, more people quitting their jobs than at any other point in decades. Yeah. How it connects to the fact that many of us have had time to reflect. So we might move forward with a little bit of discomfort, but also I think that room for us to redefine relationships, redefine who we are, step forward more boldly in the authentic versions of ourselves that maybe in that past normal for many, they didn't feel safe doing, they couldn't do, but now they're finding community where they can. And if they can't find that community, they're fighting for it for themselves and for others. And so I think there's a lot of possibility. I love Andrea says here, I'd like to go back to normal, LOL, but the feelings of uncomfort might be more out of new habits and rituals than actual personality traits, but maybe that's my opinion. I hear you. And I think when I say like, go back to normal, look, I'm thinking about parts of my life that I just accepted as normal, that I'm not accepting as normal anymore. Like I'm going to fight for certain things in my life and with others. But I hear you on the new habits and rituals. Listen, I'll say this. One of the things I talk about in the book actually is the fact that we've been experiencing technological shifts throughout time. And the fact that oftentimes we jump into new technologies passively without acknowledging that there's both great opportunity and potentially great challenges that come with it. Yeah. One example I use is the fact that a lot of us swipe left and right to determine life partners in less time than it takes to have a conversation. Okay. We now order groceries from our devices, from our phones. And it used to be that we would, understand maybe who raised the vegetables that we were eating, or even, had the opportunity to connect with who farmed the meat that we're consuming for those who eat meat. Now we will hit a few buttons. The food arrives at our doorstep, often contactless, and we don't really know the person who delivered it to us. We might never even talk to them. And while that gives us great opportunity, and while that is an amazing thing for so many, if we're not intentional about recognizing, hey, that comes at a cost, right? Those routines have changed, those habits have shifted, whether it's in our lifetime or lifetimes before, then we can miss out on that genuine opportunity for connection. Then we'll let the technology move us further away when it can also move us closer together, right? Where it has the power to bring us closer together. But make sure to leave them a great tip, as always. Yes, Nicole, of course.
Yeah, call it out, Nicole.
And
I love it.
I encourage you connecting too. I'm a big, if anyone uses Instacart, I'm the person that when you go and grab my groceries, I will write you a very thoughtful message. Like, hey, thank you so much for doing this. I'm pregnant, I'm immune compromised, I'm not leaving my house. It means a lot to me that you are getting these groceries for me today. And obviously leaving a great tip, but that little moment of connection, how many people don't chat with their Instacart people probably think I'm, a little bit off, but I try really hard to even use those spaces.
Isn't that so special though? Yeah, they don't expect that, and it's so special for them. I think that's beautiful. And Nicole says she does that too.
Good. Oh, that makes me feel better. Okay, cool.
I love it. All right. So these are so there's so many people who are responding and resonating with what you're saying. I'd love to hear from you. A little bit of a shift here. We've heard the phrase, it's not what you know, but who you know. And that leads to success, right? Who makes it to the top, so to speak. Do you agree with that? And with so little time to spend on any given, on anything really during the business day, why should we dedicate time to building relationships?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think I would probably take it a little bit further and say, it's not what you know. It's not even who you know. It's how you make people feel.
Yeah.
I think that's the differentiator in life and in business. When we talk about success, when we talk about relationship building, because you could know everybody, but it really depends how you make people feel. And this doesn't just apply, like we're talking about networking and relationships. This applies to your clients as well, to your customers as well. I believe the best businesses show up and serve people. Like businesses that put people first, profit follows. I know everyone's all about like, oh, profit first. I'm here to say people first always, because the most successful brands, the most successful small businesses, the most successful human beings, they're pursuing people. And that often means solving problems, creating solutions, right? Being a support system, investing and going the extra mile, even when it doesn't yield an immediate profit, because they're not playing the short-term game. They're playing the long game. They're playing we're in this together. All of us are in this together. And so we've got to fight for one another, right? So I don't think it's what you know, and I don't think it's who you know. I think it's how you make people feel. And that's, that goes back very much like Maya Angelou's quote around like people never forget how you made them feel. It's so very, very true. And it includes in business. When actually in the pursuit of launching this book, I reached back out to couples that I had photographed their weddings, and I'm talking 8 years ago, 7 years ago. And I said, hey, because they had known I pivoted out of photography. I said, hey, here's my next project. I just wanted to thank you for believing in me, like way back in the day when I was 18 years old, starting this business, brand new. And you believed in me. You believed in me back when nobody else did. And so I want to say thank you. And I wrote them essentially a small little love letter from me, just like authentically saying, hey, here's my new project. Here's what I'm doing. And this is for you. Like, thank you. And the number of them that came back with messages of like, this is how you made us feel on our wedding day. Like, this is why, we still follow, why we're still engaged with what you're doing 10 years later. It's not because they loved their photographs. Like they did. Okay. They loved the craft. It's because they loved the way that I made them feel. And I know the same applies to y'all. You could be the best graphic designer. You could be the best coach, the best artist. But at the end of the day, if your clients don't feel appreciated, respected, like they've had an extraordinary experience with you, then that leaves sort of this huge opportunity just hanging there, right? That leaves them feeling like, ugh, well, I loved my photos, but I didn't really feel seen in the experience. I actually felt I had a negative experience, right? Like that leads to such a different direction. Then I love this amazing craft that they did. And they saw me and they took the time to take care of me. And they went above and beyond when I hit hardship or had a difficult moment or had to reschedule my event or my project because of a pandemic, because of my mental health, because of a situation happening in my family, right? Like it's a way of approaching business. It's a way of approaching life, but it's not just who you know. I think it has to be how you make people feel.
I think that's so true and like so relatable in like all pockets of your life, right? Like every single relationship, like you're talking about from your Instacart to all the way to like your clients, there's so many opportunities to practice this in our lives. So this is like one of my takeaways from my personal takeaways here. Okay. So I would love to ask you a little bit about introverts. I personally identify as an extrovert. I saw somebody else who was like, I'm also an extrovert, but I want to, I hear like networking and also the word like introverts and like how that really is uncomfortable. And I'd love for you to give us a reframe of like, what does, how do we navigate business relationship building as an introvert?
I love this question. First, I'm going to ask everybody, drop into the chat if you are an extrovert, an introvert, if you're in the middle, if you're an ambivert, you're somewhere, if you're not sure, drop that into the chat. You're still figuring it out. Drop it into a chat. I want to kind of see, here we go. Keep going. I want you to look at the diversity of these answers here, because we're sitting in a room full of different members of the same community. We might be geographically dispersed, but the reality is y'all are tiders. You're a part of this family. And look at how many different answers we're getting in here. So the first little bit of cognitive reframing that we've got to do is to stop believing that only extroverts benefit in community. Stop believing that only extroverts contribute to community. Some of the best rising tide leaders I have ever had the honor and privilege of working with, this includes moderators too, but I'm leaning into sort of this in-person component. The best I've ever worked with are introverted. Some of the best, right? Because all of us bring very, very unique superpowers and assets to the table. So for the introvert, the way you might connect might be different. The way you might lead in community might look different. But again, we need everybody. We need ambiverts, introverts, extroverts in order to have dynamic spaces where everyone can be seen. Because if you just have a room full of extroverts, you know, it's not the same as if you have a room full of extroverts, introverts, and ambiverts. You walk in, and if you are more introverted, you might find your one introvert friend hanging out in the corner, kind of observing at first, and then you can make that one-to-one where the extrovert might be in a little group of 10 people and feel really confident and comfortable. So first, reframing and acknowledging that every single personality type has something extraordinary to offer. Actually, this is a great plug of next month's topic. We're leaning into these conversations around knowing your superpower in the month of September. And Sarah Jane Case, who is Enneagram and Coffee on Instagram, if you are familiar or follow, she's coming. She's going to talk to us about like knowing your personality type and how to actually bring that into business success. So I'm super excited. And I won't lean too far into her area of expertise, but just to say, all of us have different ways that we connect, different ways that we feel like we have our cup refilled through community. And so as somebody that's ambiverted, but whenever I test, I actually lean on the introverted side. I have found that sometimes big meetups are a little intimidating for me. And what I do is I go into the room knowing that my goal will be to reconnect one-on-one with as many people as I can. Maybe that's why I lean into the power of one and that whole idea and that concept. But if I get into a group of 3 or more people, anyone who's worked with me can attest to this. I have ADHD. So first I get distracted. Then I feel overwhelmed because I'm distracted. Then I worry about, oh my gosh, what does my face look like? Have I been like looking angry this whole time because I'm nervous and I'm distracted? If you read the book, by the way, you read about a moment where, that worst fear came true. And so all of this to say that I know when I walk in the room, I'm looking for the one-to-one. And then I just in my notes section on my phone, I don't know if this is helpful for anybody or even in virtual meetups, whenever I say, hey, let's all drop our, Instagrams into the chat so we can connect, I will write down people's accounts. And then I will go one-to-one in the DMs where I have my quiet time and I can connect with them one-on-one and continue the conversation or send a voice memo. So I still have that personal touch that feels really, really custom and special and intentional. Without the crowded space. But I think, again, the key for introverts, you are needed, you are wanted, and not just, to sit in a room and listen. Like we need you as leaders too. So remembering that brings so much value and ensures that as an introvert, like you have superpowers that extroverts don't have and vice versa. And the ambiverts got a little mix of both. So it's knowing yourself, knowing how you connect and reframing any thoughts that community is only for one personality type. Because the best communities have diversity of all kinds, and personality type is certainly part of that as well.
I love that. When I have a question about like how to find these communities besides, this group, obviously, but like if it's a local group or, ways to grow your business and like what kind of community should you be looking for?
Absolutely. So let me say this, there are no shortage of communities. All of them have something different to offer. And not all of them might be the right fit for you or the right fit for the season of life you're in or the right fit for what you're looking to get out of it and have the capability to give to it. So my first recommendation would be, if we're talking about business and you're geographically based, to start there. Actually start with your local area. One of the things that I actually didn't do a great job of early in my career is looking around and saying, okay, what does my hometown have to offer? What communities are already meeting here? What virtual Facebook groups exist? What conversations are happening on Instagram around my local area? And so actually taking the time, even if it's just 30 minutes and even if you feel very connected, let me put this as a challenge. Even if you feel like, okay, I have plenty of communities I'm a part of. It's not so much about the quantity, but I'm asking you, let's think about the quality. Let's dig into like, what communities do you really want to be a part of? What can pour into your soul? What can help you to kind of further and grow? So geographically start there, start by looking with using keywords on Facebook, other content creators or independents who are doing what you do. Like if they're getting people together for virtual coffee dates right now, feel free to just shoot them a DM, see if you can get involved in that. A lot of local communities even have like public groups for parents, public groups for businesses, public groups for events that are happening in your area. I know in Annapolis, we have Naptown Scoop, which I didn't find out about until a month ago. They just celebrated their 1-year birthday, but basically it's this guy that said, hey, I just want to celebrate everything that our hometown has to offer. And so he's become this connector for small business and and he's built a little community around it. Right. And so I think that's where it begins. It begins by doing a little bit of research, going to platforms and places where these groups can be facilitated. So we're talking about, even like Facebook, obviously, Instagram, obviously, but also things like Eventbrite. There are tons of virtual events happening right now on Eventbrite, some in-person ones as well. Meetup.com, another example. And there are so many platforms like that and places where people are connecting. There are also amazing communities being led by specific experts in different, industries. And so that's also a great place to look. Let's see. I love that. And then also I would say as a challenge to everybody, if you're in communities that you love, like be sharing about them, make sure that people know they have access to these resources, because I think sometimes these communities exist, but they're like great kept secrets. So let's stop making them secrets and let's start sharing about them so everyone has access and knows where to find them. And I love Marilyn said, a member of our local Rising Tide told me about the group. I can tell you how many times people comment in the Rising Tide group, our big group, and are like, hey, I live in Tampa. Does anyone else live in Tampa? And I always see like Marvin or Diana or, somebody hopping on and going, yeah, here's a link to our local Tuesdays Together chapter in Tampa, which is amazing, by the way. Our Tampa group is amazing. So all of that to say, don't keep them secrets, share them. I love this, Nicole. Let's stop hoarding the golden secrets across the board. Yes, please.
I love it. I love it so much because like the group leaders are like wanting to grow, right? Like they want you, and the people who want to join are like, wait, how do I join? It's like it's mutually beneficial. It's you are a connector and can let people in. One other thing that came up for me that works really well, has worked for me in the past, is like just asking people that I meet, like, how can I support you? Like, how can I support you? Like if it's a connection, if it's an introduction, if it's like, do you need a hug right now? Like, what do you need? And like, what happens is that like, I truly care about the person. So I ask that, but what ends up happening is like this sense of reciprocity that people want to also ask you that question. Like, how can I support you? And I don't do it in a way that's like, I want them to ask me this, so I'm going to do that. But it really just does like foster that like relationship, and it takes it one step further, and they feel like you care about them. So that's, I don't know if, you've done that in the past, but it's something that I think can really work well.
I love that.
Okay, so let's keep moving on. There was a question during registration that somebody asked that goes, how should we navigate our tendencies to compete and compare ourselves to others in our field? This holds me back from building relationships. I'm sure you have so much to say about this. And somebody else asked, how do you invite people into a safe space when they are actually our competition, but you want to be in community with them?
Whew. Okay. I have an answer for you here. First, I want to acknowledge that in the same way that we are built to belong, okay, we also have to accept that we are wired to compete. Human beings are wired to be competitive. These two things are not, and they don't have to be enemies of one another. Actually, the root word of compete, competare, it means, and it has kind of a leaning into cooperation. It requires two people to compete. You can't compete alone. Like the actual act of competition requires two people to enter the arena, or more, of course. But the idea that these things both exist within us, competition is not inherently negative. I want to kind of start there because I think, and I wrote a whole chapter on this, but I think sometimes we get caught up, even when we're like community over competition, as if we're villainizing competition. And so I first wanted to say, competition is not inherently a bad thing. It acts as a performance enhancing drug for the brain. It causes a certain release of neurotransmitters that enable us to compete better when being even in the company of other human beings than we would alone. It sparks innovation. It encourages us to be, moving forward and pushing for progress. And competition can be such an amazing thing. However, I hear you if you're saying, all I see is the competition. All I feel is the competition. It's like everything in life, Nat, is a competition, because I've been having this conversation for the past couple of years with many of you. And the truth is, what has happened is that the competition that could be healthy, that sparks that rush of adrenaline within us, that helps our brain to be fueled up and fired up for success, has now left the bounds of healthy competition and become incredibly unhealthy. It's no longer just in the arena. It's everything. It's, how it's not just like, we're competing for a client. It's like, we're competing, on how things look on social media, how our marriages are, how our kids are growing, I could go on and on and on. We compare and compete in areas where we shouldn't. So if you are feeling first and foremost like competition is holding you back from being able to generate genuine connections with others, to create and cultivate community, or I think the second question you asked is like, for folks that are already a true competition, like we're in the same industry, we compete, but I want us to be friends. Like, how do we do it? It starts by changing people's mindsets around their social group boundaries for how they're viewing us versus them. And in the book, I give a story of being a little kid and having a friend ask me about my belly button. And again, I know this is silly, but I hope this helps to frame it in a way that it did for me. It really helped me to kind of think through this. So I was a kid, I was sitting on a bench at recess, and my friend asked me, "Hey, are you an innie or an outie?" And I was like, I had to think about it. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like innie or outie? I was a very sheltered child. Like I really didn't know what that meant. And she's like, your belly button, does it go in or does it stick out? And I was like, oh, my belly button goes in. I guess I'm an innie. And she looked at me and she's like, well, I'm an innie too. We're both innies, And I was like, oh yeah, like we're innies. And I realized in that moment, like, oh, we now have something in common. We're now part of the same community. It's us. And then there are outies, right? But in the book, I talk about the fact that social group boundaries are arbitrary. And again, we're talking about belly buttons here. Clearly, some are very insignificant and others are very critically important. But in the case of these belly buttons, had she asked me a different question and said, do you have a belly button or not? The group boundary would have been drawn very differently. No longer would it have been, we're innies and they're outies. It would have been, we have belly buttons. Now, unless you're Kyle XY, and for any of my elder millennials that remember that Disney Channel show, who he did not have a belly button, anyone else, please tell me somebody knows that reference. Just drop into the chat, make me feel like you know that. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Unless you're Kyle XY, we all have belly buttons. And so why this is important is because sometimes when competitors walk into the same room, they're viewing it through, I'm an innie, you're an outie. This is my business and that is your business. And we have no business being in relationship with each other. Whereas when we can change that boundary and instead of saying, this is my business and this is your business, we say, we are small business owners and we have a common enemy or a common goal. We now reframe the conversation and we can enter into a room and fight for one another instead of fighting against one another. I'll give a tangible example from the last 2 years. There were business owners that would look at a competitor down the street and say, I'm an innie, you're an outie. Like, we can't be friends. And then a pandemic hit and everything about our lives had to stop. And businesses, for the first time, potentially for them that they've ever experienced, they couldn't even open their doors. They had to figure out how to survive in a season when it wasn't safe for us to continue living life the way that we had. And so no longer was it me versus you. It was us versus this pandemic. It was us lobbying for PPP to be replenished. It was us fighting together to fight for small businesses, long live small business. It was us rallying, right, against a common enemy and with a common goal. And the minute we reframe our mindsets, that's where real potential opens up for us to do life together, even in competitive spaces, because no longer is it my business is here and your business is there. And when you find success, it means I'm falling short. Now it becomes when she wins, I win. When they have success, I have success. When somebody else achieves greatness, so do I. It gives me that opportunity to do the same thing because it takes many of us fighting for better in order for others also to see that it's possible for them too. And so I believe that sometimes it requires us to flip our mindsets, to stop placing these boundaries where they don't need to be, and acknowledging that there are opportunities for us to reframe that, to find a common goal, to fight off a common enemy, to come together, to do something good in the world, to make an impact. And in the pursuit of that, maybe redrawing how we viewed one another in the first place. One last thing I'll say, and then I promise I'm done here. As I also think some of this competition comes from the fact that in the virtual space, we have a tendency to put people on a pedestal. Like we have a tendency to watch one another from a distance and not love one another up close. We see what other people are doing. We see their highlight reels and we assume that's the whole story. We assume that that's everything we need to know about somebody else. But what's really powerful about community, true community, when we come together, is that we peel back all of those highlights and we get to the human underneath. We get to really experience the fact that all of us are just doing the best we can. And I know in this week, because I've talked to some of you, like even in this week alone, outside the context of larger conversations around comparison or competition, in this week alone, so many of you have been going through so much behind the scenes. And so I just want to take a moment too to say that I think competition thrives when we stop having empathy for one another. I think comparison thrives when we look at one another as measuring sticks for our own success, or as evidence of our insecurities being displayed, that someone else isn't having that same struggle. And that's just not how life goes. That's not how human beings are. Human beings are not highlight reels. So we start to tear down these walls of competition and comparison when we start loving one another up close. We stop just watching from a distance. We start engaging one-on-one. And we have the courage and the ability to be vulnerable with one another. I can't tell you how many times someone has come to me in vulnerability and shared something they're going through, or feedback with me. I mean, critical feedback at times, like, hey, I got to be vulnerable here. This is how I'm feeling. Like, this is how this post made me feel. This is how this meetup that I showed up to made me feel. This is how I'm experiencing XYZ. And it's like these barriers, they start to get broken when I can hear from somebody and I hear the empathy, or experience the empathy, and I hear in their voice, like, I'm a human, you're a human, right? Like, we're not competitors. We don't have to compare ourselves to one another. We can do life together. And in the pursuit of that, we can rise together. So I think there's so much potential there.
Yeah, Marilyn said that a person contacted her and wanted to do a one-on-one and said that we would never do business together. And she was saying that she liked your reframe. I think there's a lot here about like this scarcity versus abundance mindset. I feel like you can talk a lot about that. Is there anything that you haven't shared that you want to share about in that mindset shift?
Yeah. I mean, I think the scarcity mindset for me is like the mean version of myself. I don't know if anyone feels like this, but I don't know if I hope somebody else feels like this, because I can't be alone in this, but I am much harder on myself than I am on other people. And scarcity is like that voice in my head that says, like, there's not enough. You're not enough. You're falling behind. You're falling short. Actually, literally, hold on. This is not a joke. This is how I open the book. I literally open the book with, you don't belong. You are not enough. You are broken and alone. They're not your friend. They're a threat. They don't care about the struggles you face. Their lives are perfect and yours is a mess. That's scarcity. That's scarcity in my head telling me that I'm not enough. And that voice, no matter how much success I have, that voice, no matter what I go on to do in my life, it will always be there, because for me personally, it will always be a battle and an intentional and conscious decision to choose abundance, right? So maybe that's not everybody's experience. That is my experience. My experience is that voice, that insecurity, that fear will always live somewhere deep inside. But I have a conscious choice to kick it out of the driver's seat, to kick it out of the passenger seat, to shove it in the trunk and say, like, I'm not dealing with you today. I'm going to put abundance next to me. I'm going to make sure my GPS is routed in the correct direction, and making that conscious choice and that conscious effort, because I think that sometimes we talk about these ideas like they're out there, like, oh, scarcity mindset's out there, abundance mindset, it's out there, and we have to go find it. And I'm telling you, you don't have to go find it. It starts within you. It starts with how you talk to yourself. John Acuff, I did a live with John Acuff last week, and he has a quote in his book that says, self-care starts with self-talk. And I think, overcoming scarcity in the same respect, it starts with self-talk. It's not just about what the world is saying. It's about what you're saying to yourself when no one is listening. So I guess that's a different part of the conversation that's not often talked about with scarcity and abundance. But I think it's catching yourself in those moments where scarcity is hopping into that driver's seat and saying, no, sorry, you're getting in the trunk. Today, abundance is riding up front, and we've got somewhere to go. Okay. And guess what? It's not just us. We have a caravan. There's a whole line of cars in this caravan, and we're going together, right? And our GPS is routed to a better future.
I love it. On that note, who is like in the caravan with Natalie? Like, raise your hand, pop it in the chat. Like, who is ready and like excited to join this conversation, to choose abundant relationships and to read Natalie's book? Because it's just such an incredible book. I can't wait to like hold it in my hands, Nat. Like, everyone has the virtual copy, but like, I just want to hold the book. We have talked about so much today. And I'm going to ask you this question, Natalie, in just a second. So think about it. Like, what do you want people to take away? But I want to drop it in the chat like whatever your takeaway was. Like, what's the one thing that you were inspired by, you took a note on, you're going to be thinking about? Drop that in the chat and let us know what you're thinking about here. And Nat, I'm going to turn it to you. What would you like for people to walk away with?
Ooh. Look, I think the biggest thing I want you to walk away with from today's conversation is all around putting people first. And I'm going to break this into two quick tidbits to walk away with. First, that means taking care of yourself. Like when I say putting people first, remember that you too are a part of this equation, that you are a person that deserves being put first. And so taking care of yourself and your needs in community with others, really nurturing your spirit in this time. If you have a heavy heart, if you are struggling, if you are growing weary, to know that you can refill your cup, you can lean on others, you can lean on community. There is nothing wrong with asking for help. I want you to hear me right now. I don't know what you're walking through. There is nothing wrong with asking for help. That is what community is for. Community is strongest in the struggle. It shines brightest in the darkest moments of our lives. So take care of you, put you and people first, right? When you need it, when you are longing for that connection. And then on the flip side, in business, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's how you make people feel. Put people first in business as well. Take care of your clients. Really nurture those relationships in your community. And if you do that, and I think Christine was the one that wrote, it's playing chess and not checkers. And I want to give you credit for that, Christine, in the chat. That's it. It's we're not playing checkers. It's not one this, one that, one. No, it's all about the long game of doing life with others, of wanting to see other people thrive and succeed. If you put people first, both in your business and as you network and build relationships, you're going to be set up for success.
So beautiful. There's so much here. I'd love for people to drop in their Instagram handles. If you resonated with somebody's message, like make sure to connect, send them a DM, continue this conversation. It's a really beautiful thing to do. Okay, so Kate, am I supposed to be naming off who's going to be winning? We have some winners. I see y'all have been busy in the Instagrams. So thank you for dropping your handles in the chat here, Kate. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to read off the winners and we will DM you directly on Instagram to arrange delivery. So keep your eyes on the Instagram. Okay. Let me see if I can read these. Rebel and Rogue Floral Couture. You have won the first copy, signed copy by Natalie. Fresh Floors LLC. Oh my gosh. I'm going to butcher this. Linternil. The Katrina Kennedy, and then Robin Colette Photography. Congratulations, you all won a copy of Natalie's book. Awesome. There have been so many beautiful moments in this conversation. Thank you all for tuning in, for being here live for the whole hour. An hour of your time is so valuable, and we do not take that for granted. Natalie, is there anything else that you want to share before we close this down?
Yes. I just want to end by saying, I really do hope y'all get to read the book. I really do. I know this is a book that we need right now more than ever before. I mean, truly more than ever. And so I do want to encourage you, if you haven't yet pre-ordered, please go and pre-order the book. If you need any support in the pursuit of your business, in growing in community with others, never hesitate to shoot me a DM, day or night. Drop into the DMs. I do my best to respond to everybody. But I want you to read this book. I know this book is going to change people's lives. I have no doubt. I poured my heart and soul into it. And there are quotes in here. By the way, Kate Masters, who hasn't shown her face on today's call, there's a quote from Kate Masters in this book that changed my entire perspective on digital community. There's a chapter about our creative and chronically ill. I'll say one last thing, and I promise I'll stop talking about the book. This whole book, I just want to say who it's dedicated to the leaders of Rising Tide, past and present, who are fighting for community in a competitive world. You are the very best of us. And I hope you get to read it. And I am so grateful for the chance to connect with y'all and be in the hot seat today, Reina. So thank you for hosting. You are amazing. And
is it true? Sorry to cut you off. Is it true that if people pre-order, it gives you credit for the first week? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Pre-ordering is a huge deal. I'm learning this as I'm doing the book. Pre-ordering is a huge deal. Every single book that's pre-ordered, it goes into your first week of sales, which helps to, maybe get on certain lists, but also to tell big retailers to pay attention. our pre-order team, I mean, LaShonda, Bree, Haley have been helping to run the book pre-order team and kind of all the marketing efforts around it. They really helped us. Like Target very rarely picks up first-time authors, and Target put this book in their online directory. Like you can go order it from Target. Obviously,
which is
love
huge.
which is huge. And obviously, I want to say like small biz, like also independent bookstores. Like you can call up your independent bookstore and order from them too. Or if Amazon's easiest for you, you can order it there as well. But that's because of the community. That's because people pre-ordered. So it's a huge deal. And there are bonuses. I don't want to ramble on for too much longer about this, but like if you pre-order it and you submit a form through, actually, let me, nataliefrank.com/book. If you submit your form through the page after you've pre-ordered, you get immediate access to chapter 1, both audio and digital download, a ton of free perks like doodles and iPhone wallpapers that are gorgeous with backgrounds designed by a member of our community, Jennifer Pace of Pace Creative Design. And you also get access to like an event that we're going to host the night before, like a really intimate, exclusive event that we're going to do the night before book launch next Monday. So yeah, we're like 7 days out. We're just 7 days out from this thing launching. So so many amazing things, and just so excited, and I can't wait for y'all to read it.
Thank you for writing this book. I think, like you said, it is a book that everyone needs right now. So I'm so excited for to receive it in all the many forms. I have it on Audible, I have it from the bookstores. You guys, you need to get this book. It's incredible. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We are so honored for you to be here, and we'll keep connecting, and we'll see you next month.
Bye, everybody.